So, you've been told you're too aware and that your nervous system runs hot, that you pick up on things most people miss, and that you just need better boundaries. Every piece of that is technically true, but it's also the wrong explanation. And the real one changes which of two very different futures you're walking toward. You already know what that script sounds like. Soften the light, protect your energy, better boundaries. None of it is wrong, and you've probably tried most of it. And the reason none of it fully closes the loop isn't that you're not doing it right. It's that it's answering a question that isn't yours. The question it keeps answering is, what is it like to be too aware? And you already know what it's like, right? You're the one living in it. The question you actually walked in here with is quieter. Here it goes. Why does the same trait, the same wiring, the same unusual width of attention end up looking like insight in one person and erosion in another? So, let's start with the part of the science they always open with. Roughly 1 in 5 humans, since Elaine Aron and Arthur Aron's 1997 paper, shows what the research calls sensory processing sensitivity. This has been documented in more than 100 other species, which is a polite way of saying evolution has kept it on purpose for a very long time. It's not a malfunction, it's a minority strategy. But the part the recommended feed tends to skip is that the same 1997 paper found at least 2 clusters inside the trait: a smaller group with an unhappy childhood and a harder time, and a larger group that looks, in almost every way, indistinguishable from the rest of the population, except for the sensitivity itself. Same wiring and very different outcomes. And the paper was careful not to pretend it knew what moved someone from one cluster to the other. So take the part that's hardest to argue with, and take it seriously. The weight is real. In 2015, J. Paul Hamilton's team at Stanford published a meta-analysis in biological psychiatry with one of the strangest titles a clinical paper gets to have. They called it Depressive Rumination, the Default Mode Network, and the Dark Matter of Clinical Neuroscience. There's a network in your brain called the Default Mode Network, the network you run when you're thinking about yourself, replaying a conversation from yesterday, rehearsing what you'll say tomorrow. And there's a much smaller region called the subgenual prefrontal cortex, involved in the biological pull toward pulling away. Hamilton found that in people with major depression, the default mode network itself isn't overactive. What's different is the coupling. The self-referential machinery gets yoked to the withdrawal machinery, and the result, in Hamilton's own phrasing, is a functional neural ensemble well suited for depressive rumination. It's dark matter because you can't see the dysfunction in the parts. You can only see it in the way the parts are pulling on each other. Notice what Hamilton is not saying. He is not saying the network of self-observation is broken. Nothing about you in that reading is broken. The machinery of thinking about yourself has been pulled into gear with the machinery of withdrawal, and together they form a motion that keeps turning on itself. Susan Nolan Hoeksema spent her career at Yale showing what that motion actually costs. And the grimmest piece of what she found is that rumination erodes the very social support that might have pulled someone out. The loop eats the container that could have metabolized it. And if that were the whole story, the answer would be simple. Less awareness. Calm the network down. Except there's a second finding that makes the simple answer impossible. Carla Sharp and her colleagues at the University of Houston in 2013 described something they called hypermentalizing, making assumptions about other people's mental states that go so far beyond observable data that others may struggle to see how they are justified. Theory of mind on overdrive. Reading the room harder than the room is being written, which means more awareness does not mean more accuracy. The fork the audience is walking isn't between having the trait and not having it. It's between two things the trait can become. There's a man who spent 60 years trying to answer exactly that question. His name is Kazimierz Dąbrowski, and he was born in 1902 on a country estate near Lublin, in the part of Poland that was still under Russian rule. When he was 16, during the First World War, he walked across a battlefield. There were several hundred young soldiers lying dead in front of him. He didn't run. He looked. What he noticed, walking slowly among the bodies of these boys, not much older than he was something he couldn't stop thinking about for the rest of his life. The faces were not the same. Some of them looked terrified, eyes wide, the last expression frozen in the last second. And some of them, for reasons he could not explain as a 16-year-old and didn't fully explain as an old man, looked calm, peaceful, as though whatever had happened to them had been met, not endured. He was 16 years old, and he had just seen the full range of what a human being could be, lying in the same field. He didn't get to walk away from the question. He survived 2 prisons, the Gestapo in 1942, and the Stalinist authorities after the war, and spent decades inside regimes specifically interested in turning sensitive people into either instruments or corpses. The entire time, he was working on one idea, and the idea was a direct answer to the question the battlefield had given him at 16. He called it the theory of positive disintegration, and the sentence at the center of it is this: the looping, ruminating, self-observing mind, strong anxieties, strong depressions, the inner conflict of a mind that cannot leave itself alone, is not the illness to be treated. It is the mechanism of growth. Without internal unease, he wrote, there is little stimulus for change or growth. Read that slowly. He is describing the exact same phenomenon Hamilton's meta-analysis is describing: the mind that will not leave itself alone, the motion that keeps turning on itself. And Dąbrowski insists this motion is not the substrate of depression. It is the substrate of becoming a person worth being. Hamilton says the looping self-observation is the dark matter of depression. Dąbrowski says the looping self-observation is the only mechanism by which a human being ever becomes more than their first inheritance. They are not describing different things. They are describing the same thing. And at least one of them has to be wrong. Except, when you read them carefully, neither actually is. Hamilton describes what happens to the motion when it gets stuck. Dąbrowski describes what happens to the motion when it moves through. Which leaves one question on the table, and it's the only one that actually matters. What makes the motion get stuck in one person and move through in another? The thing that makes the motion get stuck isn't the motion. It's the solitude of the motion. Awareness loops pathologically when there is nowhere for it to go. It integrates when there is. You can read it into Hamilton directly. Rumination erodes social support, which is another way of saying that the loop eats the container that could have metabolized it. You can read it into the HSP literature, where the 2 clusters Aron and Aron found differ most clearly on childhood context. A proxy, imperfect but pointed, for whether there was a second mind in the room early enough to help carry the first one. And you can read it most directly in Dąbrowski himself, who kept insisting that the move from disintegration to integration does not happen alone. It needs someone with enough interior to hold the fact that you are currently in pieces without trying to glue you back together the wrong way. The variable is not how much you see, it's whether what you see has somewhere to land. This reframes the entire script in a way that feels, at first, like smaller advice. It isn't. It's different advice. The niche script says the burden is the volume of perception, and the solution is to turn the volume down. Soften the light. Protect your energy. And if you've tried those things and they only partway worked, it's because they were treating the symptom, which is fatigue, instead of the mechanism, which is loneliness. The burden is not that you see too much. The burden is that what you see has nowhere to go. It sits in you, uncorroborated, unmetabolized, unmet. So it loops. But when a second mind is in the room, a real one, not a performance of one, not a therapist billing in 50-minute windows, and not a friend who nods and changes the subject, something different happens to the same wiring. The motion stops being a private torment and starts being what Dombrowski said it always could have been. Which brings us back, finally, to the two futures the hook promised, and to the reason this video has refused, the whole time, to tell you which one you're in. Because it isn't set. It's the thing that moves most easily. If you're in the loop right now, you don't need less awareness. You need the part of the awareness that's been stuck inside you to meet something outside of you that can hold it without flinching and without fixing. The niche script was half right. Your nervous system does run hot. You do pick up on things most people miss. What the script missed is that the line between enlightenment and the dark matter is not drawn inside you. It's drawn in the space between you and whoever is left in the room with you at 3 in the morning when the loop is at its loudest. So the question you walk out of here with isn't, am I too aware? You already know the answer to that one. The question is, who is the second mind? So, what do you all think about all of this? Do you relate somehow? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with people like you. Thank you so much for your attention. In this era of AI slop, making quality, researched content is not easy. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.